Hello, Professor Silverman again. Here I'm going to give you some thoughts on the Watchmen movie, which of course is our one of the two superhero movies we assigned for this section of the course. And here's the most important thing to realize about the Watchmen movie. It is intentionally and deeply critical of anyone who would want to be a superhero. If I were to give you the thesis statement of this movie, is something like this. If you would be inclined to put on a costume and a mask and go out and fight bad guys for free with no authority or accountability above you, there's probably something wrong with you. Maybe you just have mother issues, as as the Silk Spectre did, or maybe you're a sociopath, as Rorschach is suggested to be, or maybe you're just a violent egoist who gets jollies by punching people while wearing a star-spangled costume, as the comedian does. So, first important point: the movie is deeply critical of superheroes and anyone who would be a superhero. Now, that being said, this is actually somewhat easy to miss because although the source material for this, the graphic novel that this movie is based on, is deeply and intentionally critical of heroes, Hollywood also wanted to make a cool action movie out of it. So sometimes the director of the movie forgets he's supposed to be as critical about the of heroes as he's supposed to be. Um, so, um, so, for example, the movie's supposed to be critical of heroes. That's why in many of the scenes, the cool fight scenes are hard to enjoy because if you listen closely, you can hear crunching bones. And that's not supposed to happen. That's no fun. That's not what you want to be thinking about. You just want to think how cool that spinning kick was, or how cool that fight scene was. Now, the one fight scene that really violates the you're not supposed to enjoy the fight scene rules so much is the prison break scene, which is done in sort of full classic Hollywood action style, where you can't hear the damage being done to the bodies as directly. So all that to say, the movie's deeply critical of heroes, even if that's a little bit hidden. All right, a little character by character analysis. Let's start with Rorschach. Now, a lot of people like Rorschach, and it's really easy to like Rorschach because he's presented as the protagonist. We get into his mind, and we identify with him a little bit. And he's kind of like a variation of Batman. But the thing you're supposed to get, and again, I think this is a little more obvious in the graphic novels this is based on, Rorschach is a vengeful, retributive, duty-based sociopath who enjoys hurting people, and that's what he thinks his sort of purpose is, to be sort of a self-appointed sentinel of justice. So this is a very negative take on a Batman type figure, and this guy is so extremely duty-based, morally speaking, he would literally be unwilling to tell a lie to help save the world from nuclear war. That is the significance of the ending scenes about Rorschach. So so the movie's suggesting he's a lot too set in his moral principles, no matter how many moments you're tempted to like him. By the way, in case you missed it, and in case you're not convinced that there's more than something a little wrong with him, he thinks his mask, his costume mask, is his real face, and his face is his disguise. He refers to it this way several times during the movies. And even the name Rorschach, of course, comes from the Rorschach blot test, which is supposed to immediately make you think of mental issues, which, of course, he does indeed have. The comedian is a moral ironist. That means he doesn't really believe in morality. He kind of cloaks himself in a sort of patriotic morality. But at the end of the day, he's just a thug. And there's really very little heroic about him. Dr. Manhattan, the movie critiques him as sort of inhuman. This is the movie's version of Superman, or some of the medieval attributes of God are actually attributed to him. And he's basically blamed for everything he doesn't intervene in by the movie. And the movie critiques him as, inhuman in a bad way. Um, and not and not surprisingly, or in accordance with that principle, when he shows up and you think he's going to fix things, things don't get fixed the way that you might expect. Um, the Night Owl is just kind of weak, loser, needy. There are some weird things suggested about his sexuality, that he needs the superhero thing in order to be a masculine man. Silk Spectre, it's suggested that she is in this because of her mother and her mother issues. So again, I mean, they're likable enough as a couple, but again, these are not well-adjusted human beings. And finally, we should point out the main hero, or not, Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias. He's a utilitarian hero who's a genius who can calculate out the exact effects of things. Um, and he's someone who's willing to do what it takes to protect humanity from nuclear war, even committing atrocities himself, great unjust atrocities. Um, and if you watch closely, as the movie goes on, he engages increasingly in what is associated with supervillain behavior. Things like comparing himself to conquerors, to deities, having exotic pets, bases, hidden bases in remote areas of the world. And the final thing we should point out about him, like many villain utilitarians, maybe he's not really that good a utilitarian. I mean, I had access to all the wealth and the allies that he has access to, allies like Dr. Manhattan, maybe he could have found a better way to prevent nuclear war than the violent solution he comes up with. Um, so, Frankly, a lot like Thanos in the Avengers, Thanos claims as the villain, he is acting to save the universe as sort of an environmentalist who wants to cut the number of resource-using beings in half. And, if you really think this through a little bit, if he has sort of infinite power, why doesn't he just double the amount of resources or something like that? And we can ask those same questions about Bait. All right, so all that to say, The Watchmen, interesting movie, thoughtful. It's deeply critical of heroes, and both the duty-based people like Rorschach and results-based people like Ozymandias Veidt. It's deeply critical of both those views. All right, well, that's it for today. Thank you very much.